Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER Attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Confusion over the legal age to buy cigarettes.
We find out about regulations regarding our business on platforms like Twitter. It's kind of concerning.
President Trump discussed the idea of raising the age to 21 over the holidays, and it took effect immediately, leaving a lot of retailers unprepared. Tensions remain high between the U.S. and Iran. Ahead, former Congressman Lee Hamilton joins us to talk about relations between the two countries and how to stabilize the Middle East. And the 2020 legislative session started this week.
For the legalization of marijuana.
With a growing number of states legalizing marijuana, will this be the year a cannabis bill gains some traction at the statehouse?
You know, let the process happen. Let us have that conversation. Let the committee hearings take place.
Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, last month, President Trump signed a budget bill into law that included an increase in the minimum age to purchase tobacco and e-liquids from 18 to 21. But there was no grace period to implement the change. And as Adam Pinsker reports, that caught many Hoosier retailers off guard.
The owner of Indy e-cigs, which has 10 locations in central Indiana, says all his shops are compliant with the new law, but he wonders how effective this law will be.
It's the same exact bottle, it's just...
Shawnee Corey's Indianapolis warehouse is chock full of e-liquids that are distributed to his Indy e-liquid shops in Indianapolis and Bloomington.
I do enjoy helping people quit smoking, but what I don't enjoy is the bureaucracy and the constant struggle to pivot in this industry.
But his business had to make a sudden change during the holidays when a federal law raising the age to purchase tobacco and e-cigarettes from 18 to 21 took effect.
My biggest issue is when we find out about our business and we find out about regulations regarding our business on platforms like Twitter. It's kind of concerning.
That's exactly what happened on December 20th when the Food and Drug Administration announced the law would go into effect immediately after President Trump signed it. That sent convenience store and shop owners like Corey scrambling to get in compliance. Typically, they would have a couple months until the law became effective.
So that caused a great deal of confusion, both with our retailers. It caused confusion with the clerks who had to implement this change, and most of all, the customers.
Executive Director of the Food and Fuel Association of Indiana, Scott Imus, says those changes include updating point-of-sale software systems that scan IDs and changing signage. Imus says the federal government could have taken more time to notify retailers.
There's a roster of who has a tobacco certificate, so a very quick letter to them would have said, as of this date, the age of purchase is now 21.
Corey says time will tell as to whether the age limit increase will curb youth smoking, but he says the government could have gone further to regulate tobacco.
Allowing it to be only sold in arenas or avenues where age restriction just to walk into the location is being enforced.
Corey says he already requires his customers who purchase e-liquids on his website to take a picture of themselves holding up their own picture ID to minimize the chance someone uses a fake ID. He thinks the government should make that a requirement.
I believe in fair, sensible regulation. I think that when you have fair, sensible regulation, you prevent bad apples from playing.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
A House committee easily approved legislation this week to raise the age to purchase tobacco from 18 to 21. House Speaker Brian Bosma says even though the federal law is in effect, passing a similar measure at the state level would help bring more awareness to it. On January 1st, Illinois legalized the sale of recreational marijuana. Shops can't keep up with demand, and some have had to close while they replenish their supply. And in Michigan, it's only been legal a few weeks, and the story there is the same. Sales are already well into the millions of dollars. As the tides shift and more states allow the drug, advocates are hoping Indiana lawmakers will get on board. Brock Turner brings us the first of two reports on marijuana legalization and the pressure Indiana is facing to change its stance on cannabis.
For the legalization of marijuana.
As lawmakers arrived Monday for the first day of the 2020 legislative session, about 50 people holding signs, smoking joints, and chanting greeted them on the steps of the Indiana Statehouse.
We've got advocates all over the state who have stepped up at this point, and they are ready for action. They are going to take action in their communities. They're going to visit their town councils. They're going to visit their county councils, and they're going to deliver a united message that this needs to be taken care of in the state of Indiana.
Despite the recent changes in neighboring Illinois and Michigan, Hoosier lawmakers aren't keen on putting legalized marijuana up for a vote. For years, Senator Karen Talion has authored bills that would loosen Indiana's marijuana restrictions, but they've never gained any traction.
In 2018, there were 22,000 arrests in Indiana for marijuana possession. It's the second most arrested crime in the state of Indiana, and it needs to stop.
Talion joined the Statehouse protesters to call on Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb to advance the conversation. Holcomb admitted last year that he smoked marijuana in college, but says he has no plans to support a recreational or medical cannabis program just yet.
No, other states don't persuade me.
Have you ever used marijuana?
Yes.
Even though it's illegal?
Yes.
When did you use it?
College.
That comes despite growing support from constituents. The latest polling data from Gallup shows a 25% increase in the support of legalization here in the Midwest over the last decade. Pressure from those in the governor's own party is growing as well.
When I first started this conversation years ago, it was stigma and ignorance were the two biggest obstacles. But now stigma is something that's almost gone because 33 states have a medical cannabis program. I believe there are 11 now with recreational, 2 border states for Indiana.
Lucas is a Republican and one of the loudest voices in the GOP calling on legislators to develop a cannabis program. He believes neighboring states coming on board creates pressure for Indiana. He says the state's slow action has hurt Indiana when it comes to hemp production, and he doesn't want history to repeat itself.
This is something we're going to be forced to deal with, but again, now it makes no sense to not be having this conversation because the facts, the research, everything is out there. All somebody has to do is just, educate themselves.
Holcomb, however, says he won't be influenced by what other states do. That's also true of an influential organization in Hoosier politics. The Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council says the public shouldn't expect prosecutors to change how they charge individuals, regardless of where or how they purchase marijuana.
It's still going to be illegal in Indiana, and that's what we're kind of trying to stress to people in Indiana who think, okay, maybe I can go across the border and buy it and bring it back. It's still going to be illegal in Indiana. It's still going to be charged by the prosecutors here in Indiana. And again, until something changes in Indiana, that's not going to affect our stance what other states are doing.
Holcomb and other GOP leaders have said they're not interested in exploring legalization in Indiana until the federal government declassifies marijuana as a controlled substance. Federally, cannabis is considered a Schedule I drug without medical benefits. Lucas disagrees with that line of thinking. He says citing federal scheduling is an excuse and that policymakers should more closely reflect the views of their constituents.
Leaders need to lead, and this is something I'd like to see our leadership get out in front of and just stay out of the way. Let the process happen. Let us have that conversation. Let the committee hearings take place. Let's get all parties, the pros and the cons, at the table and let the people hear, what is possible for the state of Indiana that 33 other states are doing.
And that's where Lucas puts the blame on Holcomb.
I blame Governor Holcomb. I'll come out and say it. And again, I can't say enough great things about Governor Holcomb, but he being the governor of our state, being so far out in front of this and against it, it really puts up a wall. A lot of people, shy away from this issue.
Governor Holcomb's office says his stance on marijuana legalization has not changed, and his office declined to comment on the assertion from those in favor of legalization that he's limiting the conversation. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brock Turner.
Next week, we'll look at how legal cannabis is sold in Illinois and hear from a Hoosier veteran who is currently using marijuana instead of opioids. Now, let's take a look at news headlines and the latest on this week's top stories. The city of Bloomington will not relinquish control of its farmers market. Some advocates have been fighting to privatize the market in order to prevent vendors such as Schooner Creek Farm, which has ties to a white supremacist group, from participating. But as Mitch Legan reports, the park's commissioners voted unanimously yesterday to continue to allow the city to run the market.
The city of Bloomington will continue to run the community farmers market through 2020. The vote eases tensions for many vendors who rely on the market to make ends meet. Earlier this week, over 90 market vendors sent a letter to city officials asking them to keep the market city-run.
We have thousands of customers that come every year, and we want to continue that experience.
Last spring, controversy arose after a vendor's alleged ties to a white supremacist group surfaced. Vendors and patrons alike worried about the future of the market because the market's advisory council said last month threats of legal action could cause the city to stop running the market completely. However, some vendors and activists say new market rules and contract information will limit their freedom of speech.
This contract has nothing for me. It takes away my First Amendment rights as a vendor at the expense of all the other vendors as well.
After some deliberation and time constraints, the board moved to table its final vote on the market rules of behavior until its next meeting on January 28th. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
The mayor penned a letter this week saying the decision about whether the city should continue to run the market needed to be based on the long-term interest of the city and residents, not on any specific vendors. Attendance was down by more than half at this year's market. The mayor says the city has to keep working on the issues. One of the things he recommends is recruiting more diverse vendors. Democrats say they have a plan to boost teacher pay that won't reduce money from the state's existing budget. Senator Eddie Milton's plan would use excess state surplus dollars to put $100 million a year more this school year and next into existing teacher appreciation grants. His colleague Karen Tallian's plan would change the pace at which the state is paying off a teacher pension fund.
This is an accounting issue. We're still paying the mortgage. We're just moving the numbers around.
Republicans have said steps to increase teacher pay must wait until the 2021 session in a new budget. Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg has netted an endorsement from Representative Anthony Brown of Maryland. Now that's significant because Brown is the first black member of Congress to throw his support to the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Buttigieg has been criticized within the party for his scant support among African Americans. Well, Senator Melton dropped out of the governor's race this week. He says he'll instead run for another 4 years in the state Senate. His departure from the race leaves healthcare executive Woody Myers and tech CEO Josh Owens as the only Democrats vying to beat incumbent Governor Eric Holcomb. Indiana Federal Bureau of Investigation says election security is a top priority in 2020. Agents say they are working closely on a variety of related areas, including foreign influence and voter manipulation, but they also emphasize that state or county officials control most of the election process. Indiana FBI says state and local partnerships are key. The agency says its focus includes cyber attacks and secret funding. Since ArcelorMittal's Burns Harbor facility spilled cyanide and ammonia into a Lake Michigan waterway in August, the state has required the plant to send daily test results to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. Well, now the agency says the company has been distorting those results. In a letter to ArcelorMittal this week, item says the Northwest Indiana facility has been retesting when test results are higher than they should be, sometimes replacing the higher number with a lower one. In a statement, ArcelorMittal denies the accusations. Now, the state Supreme Court will deliberate on an annexation dispute involving the state of Indiana and city of Bloomington. Lawyers argued this week that the state legislature overstepped its bounds in 2017 when it inserted language into a budget bill barring the city of Bloomington from annexing any part of Monroe County for 5 years. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton says the city had no choice but to sue Governor Holcomb.
We're trying to follow the law. When the state assembly says you can't proceed with annexation, I didn't really feel comfortable saying I'm going to do it anyway.
Last spring, a lower court ruled the legislature violated the single subject clause by singling out Bloomington in the legislation. Indiana Solicitor General Thomas Fisher says under the Constitution, Governor Holcomb can't enforce the annexation law, so he shouldn't be subjected to the lawsuit. And famed golf course architect Pete Dye has died. He designed more than 100 courses around the world, more than 20 of those in Indiana. The Crooked Stick Golf Club, Brickyard Crossing, the Fort Golf Resort at Fort Harrison State Park, Woodland Country Club, and the Pete Course at French Lick Resort are all Dye courses. The courses at French Lick was named Course of the Year in 2017. Dye lived in Indianapolis and Carmel for decades. He was 94 years old and had been suffering from Alzheimer's. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. We sit down with former Congressman Lee Hamilton to talk about the future of relations between the U.S. and Iran. And faith leaders in Bloomington are coming together, despite some differences, to work towards a brighter future. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU-WFYI News Team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU-WFYI News Team is where you are and telling your story.
In a time of change, where can you find in-depth reporting and thoughtful analysis? Washington Week on PBS. Join moderator Robert Costa.
When I was at the Capitol this week, I encountered the same.
And a panel of award-winning journalists.
You're seeing a divided nation, and you're seeing.
For insights and perspective.
Tonight there was a key development in the Senate.
You won't find anywhere else.
What a week.
Washington Week.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, the conflict between the U.S. and Iran may have eased some in the past couple of days, but fears of escalating tensions remain. I sat down with former Congressman Lee Hamilton. I first asked him what he expects to see come from Iran in the near future.
Well, first, I think we're in a very uncertain period, a very dangerous period. A miscalculation, heated rhetoric, some event could happen that would push us towards war. The good news at the moment is that both parties seem to have stepped back away from confrontation. How long that will last is anybody's guess. From where I sit, it seems to me the next move is Iran's, and they could choose to quiet things down, de-escalate, or they could ratchet it up. I think their decision at the moment is to de-escalate the violence. Let's hope it stays that way. But I think what happens depends on what the leadership of Iran wants to achieve. Now, so far as we are concerned, it is not clear to me what our policy is with respect to Iran.
U.S. officials say that they're now confident that Iran shot down a Ukrainian aircraft this past week. Does this surprise you, especially the timing of all this?
I don't think anything surprises me in the region. You're always going to have these incidents of violence. And the challenge for the policymaker is to try to de-escalate, to damp them down, not let them get into a situation where every act of violence has to be met with another act of violence. That's the way for almost certain path to war. What is needed now is a path to diplomacy.
Can you help us understand a little bit about the movement of the killing of Soleimani, and does that come from President Trump, or how much is Congress involved in that?
I don't think the Congress was involved in the killing of the general at all. I don't think they knew about it. To me, it was a escalation. It was, the president, I think, is often impetuous. I think he made a quick decision. So far as I know, he didn't even discuss it with his top advisors. That's not the kind of thing you want to do without careful consultation. I'm quite sure he did not consult with any of our allies. They were surprised by it. Now, it's that kind of impetuous action that really worries me, because it could trigger a response that would throw us into a path towards war. So I did not approve that. Was that guy a good guy? No, the general's a bad guy. Is there some advantage to removing? There is. But the question is, what are the consequences of that kind of a move? And I frankly don't think we, the United States, thought very much about the consequences. So you've got to try to calm the situation down. You don't want to look like you're a pushover. You've got to stand up for your interests. But you've got to keep your eye on how do you get to peace, not how do you get to war. The path to war is easy. Anybody can get there. The path to peace is much tougher.
Well, many Bloomington faith communities are responding to issues centered on taking care of the earth. Congregations with vastly differing theologies are working together because they see protecting the planet as common ground. Bob Zaltzberg reports for our City Limits project.
For Molly O'Donnell, the urgency of environmental issues comes from one compelling source.
Because I have a granddaughter who's 3 years old, and I worry about what the world will be like for her.
O'Donnell wants to highlight the work faith communities are doing to address environmental issues. She put the group Earth Care Bloomington together with the goal of helping faith communities move toward efficiency and conservation practices at their facilities and at their homes. At Earth Care's December meeting, members of 7 faith communities came to St. Thomas Lutheran Church. They talked of the need for education and awareness in small groups, such as faith congregations.
The faith community does play an important role in this, especially in this overly politicized and environment that we're in. It's one place where we all have common values and common teachings, and it's a place where we can meet one another, unite, and work together.
The Evangelical Community Church and Bloomington Synagogue Beth Shalom are working together on environmental issues in what some may call an unusual partnership.
Interfaith communities sometimes are not the place that you're going to find an evangelical. I'm there, but I don't have any other colleagues there. Right. Yeah, and so Mady and I are working on this creation care partner thing.
Mady is Mady Hirschland. She's been active on faith and environmental issues for more than a decade and is a member of Beth Shalom's Creation Care Task Force, which she founded and previously led. She and Whitaker found a common issue in earth care.
From my perspective, when I think about environmental earth care issues, I think in terms of environmental stewardship and creation care. So as a person of faith, particularly in the Christian community, I see creation as a gift of God, and it's our responsibility as human beings to care for it.
Hirschland says with big issues like climate change, faith groups must work together. She says she wants individuals to be well-versed on actions they can take to make the most difference.
Our goal, for both congregations, is to model what it means to do what's enough. What would be enough, and to have our congregations as a whole do that, and then to lead other congregations across the state in the same way.
Earth Care leader O'Donnell says members of the congregation at her Unitarian Universalist Church are almost 100% in on following environmentally friendly practices. The church has installed solar panels, and like her, members are worried about the future.
I think a lot of people are realizing that this is important to do right away. And the youth movement, the climate strikes, it's made us all realize we don't have much time to make a difference.
Hirschland says we have to believe we can address environmental challenges, and for her, optimism comes in faith.
The most important thing we can do is to be hopeful, to realize that together we really can do this.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Bob Zaltzberg.
And Bloomington's first Freeze Fest is underway despite unseasonably warm weather. Internationally recognized ice carvers traveled from across the country to display their artistry.
They're going to vary in size. You're going to see stuff from the 300-pound mark, but just like behind us now, they're putting some 1,200-pound sculptures in the truck.
Kendall says 25 degrees is the ideal outdoor temperature to carve ice sculptures, but they say they have ways to deal with the warmer weather. And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIU-News.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.